I kicked off my work boots on the back porch and set my thermos on the railing. 43 years old, 15 years of marriage, and I still looked forward to coming home. That's what I thought about as I pushed open the back door. How lucky I was. The kitchen was quiet. Dinner wasn't started. I didn't think much of it. My wife, Claire, had been working longer hours lately at the accounting firm. I figured she was still at the office, so I went upstairs to change. That's when I heard it. Voices in my daughter's room. Laughter, soft, low. Then silence. My daughter Lily was 22, finishing her last semester of grad school. She'd been living with us while she saved money for an apartment. Her boyfriend, the guy she'd been with for almost 3 years, the guy I had basically already started thinking of as a son-in-law, was Joel, 26, worked in commercial real estate, had a good handshake and a nice smile. I'd shared beers with the man on my own back porch. I knocked twice and opened the door, the way I always did. The room was empty. I stood there a second, confused. I was certain I'd heard voices. I chalked it up to a television next door, or maybe the neighbors, and went back downstairs to start dinner myself. I grabbed a pan from the cabinet and opened the fridge. That's when I noticed the car in the driveway. Joel's black Tahoe. I hadn't seen it when I pulled in because he'd parked around the side of the house, tucked behind the hydrangea bushes, not in his usual spot. I went back upstairs. This time, I didn't knock. Claire's face. My wife's face went white the moment I opened the door. She was sitting on the edge of Lily's bed, fully dressed, but her hair was wrong. And Joel was standing near the window, hands shoved in his pockets, pretending to look at something outside. Nobody said a word for what felt like a full minute. I looked at my wife. I looked at this kid half her age. I thought about every beer I'd ever handed him, every Sunday dinner. The night I helped him pick out an engagement ring for my daughter. I closed the door and walked downstairs. I sat at the kitchen table and I didn't move for a long time. Joel came down first. He tried to say something. I don't even remember what it was, some stumbling opener about how it wasn't what it looked like. I put up one hand and he stopped. I told him to leave my house. He left. Claire came down 10 minutes later. She sat across from me. She was crying before she even said anything. I wasn't. I felt like I was watching the whole scene from somewhere near the ceiling, like none of it was actually happening to me. She said it had been going on for 4 months. 4 months. While I was driving to work every morning, while I was coaching Lily's high school reunion fundraiser calls, while I was buying groceries and mowing the lawn and living my completely ordinary life. 4 months. I asked her if Lily knew. She said no. I believed her, for what it was worth. I told Claire to stay in the guest room that night. She didn't argue. I lay in our bed and looked at the ceiling for most of the night. At some point around 3 a.m., I picked up my phone and typed out a message to my brother-in-law, Claire's older brother, a guy I'd always been close to, then deleted it. I didn't know what I'd even say. I didn't know anything yet. What I did know was this: Lily was coming home that Friday night. She thought she was coming back to a normal house, to her parents and her boyfriend, to the life she'd been building. I had 4 days. I spent the first 2 just breathing, going to work, coming home, eating whatever I could stand. I slept in my own room and Claire slept in the guest room, and we passed each other in the hallway like strangers at a hotel. On the 3rd day, I called a lawyer, an old friend of mine from college, a guy named Patrick who did family law in the next county over. I told him the short version over the phone, and he told me to come in. I went in that afternoon and sat across from him with my hands flat on his desk and went through everything step by step. Patrick told me what I needed: documentation, account statements, evidence of the timeline. He said, don't move money, don't threaten, don't make scenes. He said people who keep their heads in situations like this always come out better than people who don't. I kept my head. That Friday, Lily came home with 2 bags and a box of leftovers from her apartment mini fridge. She dropped everything in the hallway and hugged me first, the way she always did. She smelled like the same shampoo she'd used since she was 16, and I held on a second longer than usual, and she didn't notice. We sat down for dinner, just Lily and me. Claire had gone out, which was easier, and Lily talked about her thesis and her professor and a funny thing that happened on the train. She asked where Joel was. I said I thought he had a work thing. I almost told her right there. 30 seconds of watching her eat pasta and talk about her future, and I almost destroyed the whole room. But I thought about what Patrick had said. Keep your head. So I passed the bread and I asked about her thesis and I kept my head. The next morning, Claire came downstairs while Lily was still asleep. She sat at the kitchen table again. She looked worse than I'd ever seen her look. She asked me if we could talk. I poured her a coffee because that's just who I am, I guess. I poured it and I sat down and I waited. She said she was sorry. She said it had been a mistake, that it started at a work function where Joel had been a +1 and then just spiraled. She said she loved me. She said she didn't want to lose our family. Then she told me she was pregnant. I put my coffee cup down very carefully. She said she wasn't sure yet. She'd taken a test, but she hadn't been to a doctor. She said she needed me to know before Lily found out about any of it. She said she thought we could handle it, that we could figure something out, that maybe... I stood up and walked outside and stood on the back porch for a long time. The neighbor's dog was barking somewhere down the street. It was a cold morning, that specific kind of mid-November cold that feels personal. I stood there in my socks on the concrete and looked at the yard I'd spent 15 years maintaining, and I tried to find one thought that didn't feel like falling. I went back inside. I didn't sit down. I told Claire I needed her to be honest with me, completely. One time, right now, where I would never be able to have any conversation with her ever again. I asked her if there was any chance the baby was mine. She was quiet for too long. She said we'd been distant for months. She said she didn't know. I told her to go upstairs. I called Patrick. He picked up on the second ring. I said there's been a development. He told me to come in Monday. That weekend was the longest of my life. Lily was home, and she was happy, and she kept texting Joel and getting short responses that she didn't seem to read as anything unusual. I watched her from across the living room, laughing at something on her phone, curled up in the corner of the couch, and I felt this specific helplessness that I can't really describe, like standing on train tracks and not being able to move. Sunday night, Joel called me. I almost didn't pick up, then I did. He was crying. He kept saying he was sorry, kept saying he didn't know how it happened, kept saying he was in love with Lily and he'd made a catastrophic mistake. I listened to all of it. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. I asked him if he knew about the pregnancy. The silence told me everything. He knew. Claire had told him. And he hadn't called Lily. He hadn't called me to come clean. He'd called me to gum. Only now, 4 days later, only because I'd found out, to manage the situation. I told him I'd be in touch through my lawyer. Then I hung up. Monday morning, I was in Patrick's office at 8. We had a long conversation. He walked me through next steps: separation agreement, asset protection, a formal timeline of documentation. He asked about the pregnancy, and I told him what I knew. He said paternity was going to be a significant issue and that I should not, under any circumstances, agree to anything on that front without a DNA test. I told him I had no intention of it. I went home that afternoon and told Claire it was time to tell Lily. She begged me not to. She said Lily wasn't ready. She said we should wait until after the holidays, until after Lily's thesis defense, until after some imaginary future moment when this would somehow be easier to hear. I told her she had 24 hours, or I'd tell Lily myself. Claire told her that night. I wasn't in the room. I was in my home office with the door shut, and even through 2 walls I could hear my daughter. Not words, just sound. The kind of sound that a person your age doesn't make very often. The kind you forget they're still capable of. When it went quiet, I went to Lily's room. She was sitting on the floor with her back against her bed, legs pulled up, the way she used to sit when she was a teenager, and something had gone wrong at school. She looked at me and her face just crumpled. She said, "Did you know?" I told her I'd known for 6 days. I told her I'd been trying to figure out how to protect her. She said, "There's no protecting me from this, Dad." She was right. I held her anyway. The next few weeks were organized chaos. Claire moved to her sister's place temporarily. Lily took a leave from her last semester, just 2 weeks. Then she went back because she said she needed something normal to do. I filed formally in early December. Patrick handled most of it while I tried to keep the house running and my job running and my own head in the general vicinity of level. The paternity question dragged on. Claire was resistant, then cooperative, then resistant again, depending on the day. Joel, through his own lawyer, was being cautiously quiet. He and Lily were done. She made that clear within 48 hours and didn't waver once. She blocked his number and didn't look back. That part, at least, was uncomplicated. The DNA results came back in January. The baby was Joel's. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing. I sat in my car in a parking lot for a while after Patrick called me. Then I drove home and made dinner and ate it standing up at the kitchen counter. And somewhere in the middle of it, I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't even fully realized was clenched. Because as long as there'd been uncertainty, there had been this small, horrible voice in the back of my head that said I'd have to make an impossible decision. Now I didn't. The divorce was finalized in March. Claire got a fair settlement. I'm not a vindictive person, and Patrick told me petty fights cost more than they're worth in time and money and sanity. She moved into an apartment 20 minutes away. The baby, a boy as it turned out, was born in May. Joel's name is on the birth certificate. He and Claire worked out their own arrangement, which is something I have never asked a single detail about and never will. Lily finished her thesis in April and defended it successfully, and I drove up for the defense and took her out for dinner afterward, and we ordered dessert and she laughed at something I said. Really laughed, for the first time in a long time, and I thought, okay, we're going to be okay. I didn't date for a long time after that. People asked, friends, my sister, eventually my own mother, very gently, over the phone. I always said I wasn't ready, which was true. I liked the quiet of the house. I liked cooking for myself and watching what I wanted and not explaining my schedule to anyone. About a year and a half out, I met someone. She's a landscape architect. We met at a hardware store, of all places. She was looking at exterior stains and I gave an unsolicited opinion and she didn't walk away, which I took as a good sign. We've been taking it slow. No rush. That's new for me and I think it's the right approach. My daughter is doing well. She's got her own apartment now, a good job, a group of friends she trusts. She still comes home for dinner most Sundays. She talks about Joel occasionally, the way you'd talk about a weather event, matter-of-factly, with the kind of distance that I think is hard-won and real. Claire and I don't speak much. When we do, it's brief and civil. She seems to be finding her way through things. The boy is almost a year old now. That's her life to navigate. I think about the version of myself who came home that ordinary afternoon and almost skipped going upstairs. Almost. One small decision. I went up to change my shirt, I heard something, and I opened a door. I'm glad I did. As brutal as everything that came after was, and it was brutal, there were nights I wouldn't wish on anyone. I'm glad I know. I'm glad Lily knows. I'm glad we didn't spend another 5 years in a house built on something rotten underneath. The porch is the same. The yard is the same. The neighbor's dog still barks at everything. I had some guys from work over last month, and we sat out there on a Saturday evening and drank beer and talked about absolutely nothing important. And at some point, I looked out at the lawn and the garden and the last of the October light coming through the trees. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like the house was mine again. Not ours. Mine. And that was enough. People ask me sometimes how I held it together. Honestly, I'm not sure I have a clean answer for that. I think what kept me upright through all of it was something pretty simple. I just refused to become someone I didn't recognize. When I opened that door and saw Claire sitting on Lily's bed, something in me went very still. Not numb. Still. There's a difference. Numb is when you stop feeling. Still is when you feel everything and decide not to let it drive the car. I'd like to say I planned that response, but I didn't. It was just what happened. I closed the door, I walked downstairs, and I sat at the kitchen table and let it land. That stillness, I think that's what saved me. Not from the pain, because the pain came plenty and stayed a while, but it saved me from making the situation worse than it already was. It saved Lily from finding out in the worst possible way. It saved me from a legal mess that would have cost twice as much and taken twice as long if I'd acted from anger instead of from sense. There's something I've come to believe pretty firmly after all of this. The choices people make always carry a weight, and that weight always lands somewhere eventually. Joel made a choice to betray the woman who trusted him enough to say yes when he proposed. Claire made a choice. 4 months of choices to build something dishonest inside the walls of our home. Neither of them walked away clean from that. Not because I engineered it that way, I didn't. I just stepped back and let consequence be consequence. That's not revenge. Revenge is a project. This was just reality doing what reality does. What I'm more proud of, honestly, is the Lily part. Because Lily didn't deserve any of it, and she was the one I was most worried about. When she sat on the floor of her room that night with her back against the bed, looking up at me with that expression, I knew she was asking whether the ground was still solid. I couldn't give her back what she'd lost. I couldn't undo what had been done. What I could do was stay. So I stayed. I kept dinner on Sunday nights. I drove up for her thesis defense. I sat across from her at a restaurant table and let her laugh at something dumb I said. And I thought, there it is. That's the thing that survives. Integrity doesn't make hard things easy. I want to be clear about that because I think people sometimes expect it to. It doesn't. What it does is give you something to hold on to when everything else has gone sideways. When I look back at the months after that afternoon, the lawyer meetings, the sleepless nights, the strange quiet of a house where one person used to be, what I see is a man who made a decision, over and over, to do the next right thing. Not the dramatic thing, not the satisfying thing, just the right thing. I'm on the other side of it now. There's a woman I like spending time with. There's a daughter who came through the fire and didn't lose herself. There's a back porch and a yard I still maintain, and some evenings out there that are genuinely, quietly good. The house is mine now. That's enough.